Good morning, everyone. 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. Good to see so many people come to listen to our guest today, Greece's Finance and Economy Minister, Kyriakos Pierrakakis, who joins us today to discuss, I think, more upbeat and positive things for the future in terms of, in particular, the opportunities around the digitalisation of the economy. He has been Minister for Digital Governments in the past from 2019 to 2023, and he also led Greece's digital transformation. Along with those roles, he served as the chair of the OECD's Global Strategy Group from 2021, and he was reappointed to that role last year. So very well placed to discuss what we're going to discuss today. But before we kick off, Minister, and thank you again for joining us, it's almost 15 years ago to the day where we in Ireland had a very traumatic experience of needing a bailout. And I think both our countries went through very difficult periods around that time. You might just sort of give your experience of how you came out of that difficult period over the past 15 years, brought unemployment down, brought growth back, so we can sort of evaluate it compared to our own recovery.
First of all, it's great to be here Monday morning at 9 a.m., as you said, and it's a great privilege to be in Ireland for the first time. To be fully frank and quite blunt, in the Greek case, we did it after having excluded all other possibilities in the following way. Unlike Ireland, where I think both countries experienced collective trauma out of needing a bailout, in our case, we needed 3 bailout packages instead of 1. So our political economy, our political system had trouble integrating the necessary measures that we needed to implement in order to be able to exit this very difficult situation that we were in. I mean, if you look at the numbers, we collectively lost around 25% of our GDP. In real terms, this is 1929. This is the Great Depression. Exiting this crisis is a manifestation of the strength of the Greek people, of the Greek families, of Greek society overall. And it's also a manifestation of European support. It's a Greek story and a European story. Right now, as you said, we're growing fast. We're growing by 2.4%. Budget that I presented in Parliament and which we will vote before the year is out projects 2.4% growth for 2026. Strong primary budget surpluses, headline surpluses in the last years, and a de-escalating debt, the fastest de-escalating debt in Europe right now. Post-COVID, we had almost reached 210% in terms of our debt to GDP ratio, and the projection is that we will be below the 120% threshold in 2029. So it's a big and rapid de-escalation, and it's a manifestation of a change of mindset. My generation in politics, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, and the people who are currently running the government don't want to repeat the mistake of the past, passing the burden to the next generation. We fully understand the cost of complacency. We paid that cost in the previous years, and we fully grasp the benefits of reform. This is happening, I would say, this positive change in Greece, in a policy mapped by a triangle. Part of it is reform, more than 100 reforms in the last years. Digitization being perhaps the most popular of those reforms because it reduced administrative burdens. A healthier banking system, reducing the non-performing loans in our banking system, and getting our fiscal house in order, producing surpluses instead of deficits, implementing EU policy. But the core change that the society needs to achieve, a change which is obvious in Dublin, but I would also say it's obvious in Athens now as well, is this change of mindset, understanding that you need to be fiscally prudent and to have a growth mindset at the same time. And I think this is something that in different ways, because every national pathway is at the end of the day different, there is a commonality in this. Both countries want to succeed moving ahead.
And in terms of that change of mindset, are people more willing to have a more informed conversation about all areas of economic policy these days?
Absolutely. And they want to see, I would also add, the benefits of growth, because again, we started from a rebound, but in effect, it's a reset. People want to see those benefits of growth reaching every family. And to give you one example, a couple of weeks ago, we passed from the Greek parliament the biggest tax cut in our modern history. And this tax cut was not just a tax cut. It was structured around the big demographic challenge that we have in Greece right now. we have this demographic challenge all over Europe. There is no country in Europe that currently has the replacement rate in terms of fertility, in terms of families. This is going to be a challenge for all of us. It's certainly a challenge for us. We have a bit more than 1.3 kids per couple right now in Greece. This is going to affect every policy area. So we figured that we wanted to structure our tax cut around supporting families, around supporting young adults entering the labor market, around eliminating real estate taxes in villages in Greece and not focusing, I would say, primarily in big cities, focus more on the villages, on what we call the periphery throughout the country. This had a very specific logic. So all of those changes are happening because they are part of an informed interaction with citizens who grasp the problems on the ground, but we also grasp them too, and we respond.
Good. Well, from moving challenges to opportunities, the opportunities with the transformation to the digital economy are enormous. One fact that I think people don't know as much as it might be known is that now in Europe, across the EU, 1 in 20 workers are information communication technology specialists. It's grown from 6 million to 10 million over the past decade. And I often think we sort of sometimes allow ourselves to buy into maybe an American narrative that we've all just become a museum continent and that we don't really, we're not producing new ideas and we're not at the cutting edge. Certainly we don't have the huge American companies that in the tech space, but certainly there's plenty going on in the tech world in Europe. We know that here. Maybe share some of your more sort of positive, optimistic developments in Greece in terms of the advantages and the opportunities there.
I would say that there are many things that need to happen at once in order to grasp the potential of digital transformation and innovation, because those are elements of the same story, but different elements themselves. One core element is how you transform your state and your government. And transforming it is not a digital story. It uses digital means, but in reality, again, it's a mindset change. Governments, countries, states haven't been designed really. They have occurred as an accumulation of thousands of policies decided upon by policymakers historically, from different governments, different parties, etc. But this fundamentally means that at the end of the day, if you look at how governments serve citizens, they are quite bureaucratic in most places in Europe. Estonia, for instance, is the vividly different story, the opposite story, because everything happens digitally and automatically from work or from home. But in most other places, when you need to interact with your government, you typically need to visit 5 different public services, 7 different public services physically. This, for us, presented a challenge because arguably, in 2019, we had the most bureaucratic country in Europe. We hadn't solved that in the difficult years. So we decided to create a digital ministry, a new ministry. We endowed that ministry with specific powers, to be able to interoperate data sets, to be able to redesign what we call life events. And we ended up simplifying bureaucracy a lot, and we ended up offering public services through one single platform in Greece, gov.gr, which is considered to be one of the most popular reforms in the history of our country. So part of the narrative is, how do you transform your government? And this is not necessarily a very technologically sophisticated story. It's not necessarily about asking the question, what can we do about AI in Ministry A or in Country B? That's the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is, how can I change the way I serve my citizens? How do I introduce service design parameters in government policy? And I can use technological solutions to provide them better. But that doesn't necessarily involve machine learning or LLMs or AI-driven solutions. It can be a simple SMS. It can be a very simple technological solution in the provision. Again, mindset change. You design policy, you typically have an economist in the room. You typically have someone who understands public law in the room. You need someone who understands technology in the room too. That's lesson A for me. Lesson B is, how do you develop an innovation-driven economy? How do you grow startups in Europe? How do you link that with your university system? How do you fund them? How do you leverage the capabilities of the single market? And this is pure Draghi. This is the Draghi report. This is removing the barriers that exist between the member states of the European Union. This is reduction of administrative burdens domestically, reduction of burdens that exist between the member states of the EU. At some point at the growth stage of those companies, be they Irish or be they Greek, you will probably need a non-European investment bank to help you, which is not necessarily bad. but it shouldn't be necessary. It shouldn't be a necessary ingredient of the growth phase. You should have your full economic destiny potentially achieved at the continent. So in order to achieve that, we come to the core debates that are currently happening at the Eurozone level and at the EU level. Simplification, savings and investment union, digital euro, in the innovation economy around the financial system, all of those topics taking place at once, plus domestic policies, which here in Ireland have been very successful. I think every country in the EU has a lot to learn from Ireland with regards to how you managed to attract technological players in Ireland in the previous years, which had a strong tax element, but also I would say a state that works element. You attracted them because your government, your state works well. We tried to learn from that example. In the Greek case, for instance, we tried to attract hyperscalers in Greece in the previous years. And in our case, I would argue and I would add that it was a little bit more difficult to do because in 2019, Greece was in the 301 list of the US Secretary of Trade. And when people asked me in Greece, what is the 301 list of the US Secretary of Trade, I replied, fundamentally, it's a list that you don't want to be on. We exited that list because we weren't paying software licenses up until 2019. We exited that list and we passed a single piece of regulation, a single piece of law, rendering the Greek state a client of the public cloud, saying that we're transitioning everything to the public cloud with specific GDPR rules, with specific regulations, but with a growth mindset, unless we have a specific national security concern or something else. But even that signal and that catalyzation of change at speed and the density of time showcased leadership on that front and convinced our international partners to invest.
And you've picked up on two things that I want to come to, savings and investment union and the security dimension of it. But before that, in this major change, were you focused on citizens, individuals, or was the change businesses as well, or both, in terms of that interface between the state and...
It's both. And I would say it's both. You begin from a citizen-centric basis. But in reality, the change of mindset here is you need to make it citizen-centric and business-centric, not state-centric. And typically, the way we understand government policy, the way we even speak about it, is not citizen or business-centric. We speak using the language and the vocabulary of the state, of our governments. Ministry A is doing this, Ministry B is doing that, and this is quite vertical, that's quite bureaucratic. This is not the vocabulary that citizens understand. Because citizens at the end of the day don't care about Ministry A or Ministry B. They care about being served. I think it's absolutely the same about businesses, and I think it's absolutely the same throughout Europe. They want targeted regulation that works, and they want to have it tailor-made for an innovation economy that operates at the technological frontier. So the only way to achieve that, especially as the innovation rates are accelerating, is by being nimble and swift.
And shifting to the EU level, clearly there was a lot of regulation in recent times. There's been something of a rethink around that regulation. In terms of how that's affected business and innovation, do you think Europe might have gone too far in areas of regulation around the digital economy?
Look, there are certain areas where that regulation was absolutely necessary, and it's good to be a regulatory powerhouse, a regulatory superpower on certain things. The GDPR is one of them. I understand that there are concerns at the business community about the costs of certain regulations, but I think that we value as Europeans privacy a lot. So it's good to have a benchmark, especially on privacy. Now, on other topics, I would say that the devil lies in the detail and that it depends. It's what they call in regulatory theory the Collingridge dilemma, if I remember it correctly. You regulate too much and too early, you impede technological development. You regulate too late, you lost the window of opportunity to do the right thing at the proper time scale, at the proper time frame. So having said this, I think that we need to first map what we have done. Believe it or not, broadly speaking, what you can't measure, you can't reform, you can't do policy on, you can't do policy upon it, you can't really understand it if you haven't mapped it and you haven't measured it. And if you ask the question, have we measured ourselves? Do we know from a citizen-centric perspective or from a business-centric perspective, be that in Europe or be that in any member state of the EU, Do we know how many services provide to citizens? Do we know which parts of those service provision policies touch upon European regulation or domestic regulation on top of it? The blunt answer is that we typically don't. So we try to do that exercise, to cut a long story short, in Greece. We have a platform, which I presented to the Irish Taoiseach before, which I think is quite interesting. I also presented it to my colleagues at the Eurogroup, which maps all the laws, all the life events, all the requisite regulations that we have in the Greek case, mentions in every life event. For instance, renewal of driver's license. How many steps does it entail? Which part of it involve European laws? Which part of it involve domestic laws? If you have mapped that, then you can simplify it. Then you have a sense of how you can limit it. And part of the decision-making process needs to happen in Brussels. Part of the decision-making process needs to happen in Athens and Dublin and the capitals of every member state. Many countries in the world are trying to do this. There is no way we can catalyze an innovation economy without doing that mapping exercise and without cutting excess regulatory red tape.
Tech regulation is a particular issue here because the scale of the US tech companies being based here. Do you see that, or have you noticed tech regulation becoming a bigger issue in the relations between Brussels and Washington, or between your capital and Washington? Is it something that's on your radar? Is it causing a problem?
I would say that it would certainly constitute a debate of the coming years, the way we regulate technology. It has been a debate for a long time now. It's not a discussion happening in 2025 or 2026. We have competition rules and competition laws in Europe, which obviously touch upon the structure and the provision of services by tech giants created by the United States. But I think that we should have a more flexible and quite smart mindset when we think about those issues. Let me give you one example, which we previously discussed before entering the room. I recently had a piece at The Economist speaking about telecom. And on telecom, we have two European players, Scandinavian players, who were affected, perhaps in a positive manner, by the broader technological competition happening in the previous years on behalf of the first Trump administration. But we didn't manage to create ecosystems around them, let's say, in the Draghi way, thinking about leveraging the single market in telecommunications, creating broader auctions. For instance, what we tried to do in Greece was using a part of the auction proceeds for 5G to create a fund, which then invests in 5G applications, because we were cognizant of the fact that value in 5G would come from the app layer, from the application layer, rather than from infrastructure itself. Now, that's a technological debate, a sophisticated debate, perhaps, for some people who are not in the technology sphere, but that's how you create European champions. You create ecosystems around them, and you leverage the single market. We missed that window of opportunity in 2020. We created a Greek fund, but the Greek fund is smaller than what you would require in order to create a broader European ecosystem. Imagine, if you do the counterfactual, of having a broader European fund leveraged by the EIB. In that sense, we would have been able to create a broader ecosystem. So I think this is the natural consequence of reading the Draghi report, I would say properly. It's an opportunity cost. Together with the non-development of the savings and investment union in Europe, it's the biggest opportunity cost of our times. And we certainly need to think about all the technology questions like the one that you asked from that mindset. Should the question be, let's create European versions of everything? Or should the question be, let's leverage the capabilities of our players who sit close to the technological frontier, and we can create not even European, but global champions around them if we do a smart and targeted industrial policy? I think we should think in terms of the latter rather than in terms of the former.
Okay. In terms of funding that, we've certainly been doing a lot on Savings and Investment Union at the Institute in recent times. It's not entirely sure that reflects greater momentum in Europe towards actually achieving Savings and Investment Union. I'd be interested to hear what your sense is on the momentum behind Savings and Investment Union, and then more specifically, what mechanisms could be created to ensure the funding of particularly startups and scaling up companies, more akin to what happens in California. so that we at least improve the funding piece for those high growth companies?
I see a positive momentum in the sense that I see progress happening on the ground. The debate is about how quickly do you move and how rapid this progress is. And all of us agree that we want even quicker progress to be achieved. I think that the heart of the Commission is at the right place. I think that the proposals of the European Commission are solid. Primarily, I would say, it's the responsibility of the member states to produce tangible results on top of those proposals. And here, I remember this maxim of literary advice: show, don't tell. Is it only an institutional debate, a regulatory debate, or a directive debate to achieve the SIU? I would say it's not. We will get the institutional reforms right. We will deliver them. It will be a debate whether or not we will be delivering them in 2, 3, 5 years, but the delivery will happen. It's also a question of mindset, of thinking in terms of creating cross-border champions, European champions, cross-border M&As. And the reason I said show, don't tell, is a function of the line of thinking that capitals like Athens have. We learned from the experience of places like Dublin, and we decided that we wanted Euronext to obtain the stock exchange in Greece. It was a private decision, but it was a decision that my government supported because we wanted to be part of a broader liquidity pool. We wanted to be part of a broader European story. I recently heard Chancellor Merz saying that Europe should have a single stock exchange. We adhere to that viewpoint. We agree. But those decisions, which do not only touch upon the stock exchanges of Europe, they touch upon the banking systems of Europe. Again, we recently had a cross-border M&A. UniCredit decided to increase their stake in Alpha Bank, one of our 4 systemic banks. We were again positive in that development because we would view it as non-commensurate with saying that we're pro-SIU if we weren't. So we understand that we need that scale. Scale will be achieved by institutional reform. Scale will be achieved by those types of specific cross-border M&As happening on the ground. And governments like ours should be supportive of them.
But is the banking system really where we need to be focused on? Is the problem for Europe, or what's your diagnosis of the problem in terms of why we haven't created more big tech companies? Is it because of funding? Is it because of the regulatory burden in Europe? Is it because of the tax system? Is it the labor market?
It's a function of many things. But even if you think in terms of banking, we typically think in terms of the classical banking parameters. We should also look at the technological investments of banks. And if you look at the technological investments of European banks right now, I would simply say, put them down on a PowerPoint and compare them to the technological investments of American banks or Chinese banks. And there you have a technology policy story as well. And this has the potential to upend the overall banking system if we don't do the requisite technological investments in a swift and nimble manner as well. But with regards to the broader technological story, I would say it's a function of many things. It's a function of how quickly you produce innovative ideas through the research labs of your countries and the university systems of each country in Europe. It's a function of having the proper funding capabilities, be they from the banking sphere, be they from venture capital funds being created in Europe. But even from that standpoint, we are a bit fragmented. And we shouldn't be. That's why we need that single market scale. At the end of the day, this involves a decision. Are you going to have 27 efficient markets or 1? We need 1 efficient market to be able to grow and create those champions, those technological players at scale. And in Greece, one of the best stories of the last 15 years during the crisis, because as you said, it's 2025. In the Greek case, it was a similar period that we required our first bailout. And we vividly remember that. It's collective trauma, it's national trauma. And I think we have learned the lesson of that experience. But in the Greek case, one of the good stories of the Greek crisis was that the European Investment Bank, through the European Investment Fund, created a series of small targeted venture capitals and angel investor funds, which catalyzed the creation of startups in Greece for the first time. We have our own unicorns, we have started developing them. But if we keep on focusing this discussion on a member state basis, on a national basis, I think we're missing a big opportunity because the only way to create that economy of scale is by somehow removing all the barriers and developing those players at the European scale.
Moving on to security, the big major change, I suppose, in recent years has been the security situation in Europe, not just the war in Ukraine, but also concerns about de-risking the relationship with China. I see somebody has an opinion piece in the Financial Times this morning about decoupling from the United States. Will Europe be forced to become more of a fortress, a bloc, less connected to the rest of the world as a result of these of more challenging relations with the superpowers in the world? And the only way it can be any way influential in the world will be to deepen integration, and this will be one of the reasons we move in that direction as much as an economic necessity.
You know, whenever I hear the term fortress, I remember probably what is my favorite story from ancient Greece. And my favorite story from ancient Greece is a phrase said by the oracle at Delphi when the Persian invasion was happening. And the oracle at Delphi was asked, how is Athens going to be saved? And the response of the oracle was, the wooden walls will save the city. The more conservative mindset of the period tried to interpret this literally. Let's create walls and make Athens a fortress. Themistocles interpreted it differently and said the wooden walls are the ships and we will win at the sea. I love this analogy because Themistocles won the debate and won the Battle of Salamis. The only way to view this debate is in terms of openness. You should interpret walls as ships. We should think in terms of a very open mindset. This is what has taken Europe, I think, ahead. It carries a lesson which echoes through the ages, this story. For us, it shouldn't be about trying to create, again, there are certain things where we have a very strong national security mindset and flavor. Technological sovereignty is a debate about control, not only a debate about autonomy. And sometimes you control more by being surgically smart in how you regulate, in terms of how you regulate, by being surgically smart in terms of how to hedge between technologies, rather than focusing uniformly in terms of a one-size-fits-all approach of creating European versions of every technology solution that you have on the table, because you simply can't. We operate in an environment of scarcity of resources. When you have scarcity of resources, I think that, I'm influenced by David Ricardo. I think that what you do is that you capacity build the areas where you have the advantage, be that a trade advantage or an innovation advantage, if we think in terms of technology champions. That's why when, for instance, before you asked me about AI, I replied 5G. We had two players where we have the advantage and we're close to the technological frontier. Capacity build that and be synergistic about the rest. And then all your national security considerations, they can be part of a very smart and not extremely burdensome regulatory deployment phase. You can create smart regulations which allow you to integrate your national security considerations in terms of how you interact with technology players. It's not a black and white thing. It's not an approach where you build a fortress and you start developing your own thing across the board, plainly because you can't.
Okay, I'm going to start going out to questions from the audience very briefly. So I see one already noted here. Also, I can see questions coming in from our large online audience. But let me just finish with one on the security side of things. Greece has, for a long time, been one of the biggest defense spenders relative to GDP because of your particular situation. Do you think that's certainly here in Ireland, we have a very low defense spending, and we're sort of struggling to see the challenges and the real threats and how the security environment has changed? Do you think Greece is maybe well positioned because you never really shrank your military because of your local situation? Is it less of a trauma for you, and how do you read that in Brussels with your fellow finance ministers in terms of how the conversation in Europe is moving towards rearmaments and traditional military threats?
I would say that we were always an elevated defense spender because of our security situation in Greece. But the European question, as it is evolving, should also become a question about spillover effects, because the innovation economy in many places in the world, certainly in the United States, is a function of how to optimally target that spending once you do it. And it's also a question about economies of size and scale. I think that the European Space Agency, for instance, offers a very good example about how good results can occur when you pool resources and you do joint procurement. I experienced that through the European Space Agency in microsatellites programs. So we can certainly pool certain resources together and be non-repetitive in terms of what we procure and what we do in certain parts of Europe, perhaps even across all Europe. We all need border protection. We all need border control. We all need specific technological solutions that can help us and enable us. And many things that we pay for through defense spending have dual uses. So this is a situation and a policy decision apparatus where we need to be pragmatic and targeted. And I think that as many countries in Europe, not us, because as I said, we were already an elevated defense spender, as many countries in Europe are increasing their defense spending right now, I see the opportunity in terms of pooling resources and in terms of being more targeted and more innovative in terms of capacity building a domestic European industry overall.